Straight up, Kane and The Undertaker are two of my favourite wrestlers of all time. You just can't help it. If you were a kid in the mid to late 90s and all of a sudden you saw these hocus pocus people and all the crazy backstory they had, it just happened. You just fell in love with them and you were like, oh my gosh, when I get older, I want to have a burned face and I want to be able to wear the Kane mask. I mean, that was stupid, but kids are stupid, then eventually grow up and you learn. But they have been warring since 1997, so I feel like the time, especially because maybe The Undertaker has officially retired, is to go through all their matches and rank them from the worst to the best. So that's what we're going to do. My name's Simon Miller. Sit yourself in, get your ass cheeks warm. Let's do it. Number 15, Judgment Day 1998. This isn't even me judging this because apparently, rumoredly, Vince McMahon said after this that he thought the 1998 clash at Judgment Day between Kane and The Undertaker was flubbing rubbish. I mean, he didn't say flubbing, but there may be kids watching. The real issue here is that it was more about the story and everything going on outside of the ring than what was supposed to be happening in it, because Stone Cold Steve Austin was the special guest referee and he had been screwed out of the WWE title a few weeks before because of Kane, because of The Undertaker, and of course, because of Vincent Kennedy McMahon. He had managed to worm his way in here as the special guest referee though, so as soon as he saw the opportunity, he basically beat both guys up and they kind of pinned each other, or at least Austin counted them out 1, 2, 3, which meant now nobody was the champion. Vinnie Mac had a meltdown, and then Rattlesnake was like, oh yeah, I did it, give me a beer. Because again, that's what happened in the late 90s. In reality too, it was just a bit too long. Nobody wanted to see this go on for 17 minutes, and when all was said and done, you still had no clue what the direction was. Also, Taker and Kane by this point had already proven what they were capable of. It's just one to forget. Number 14, SummerSlam 2000. There was some hype for this one because it was the first time that Kane was taking on the American badass version of The Undertaker, so fans rightfully thought, we'll probably get a different bit of a presentation here. And while they did, that presentation also sucked just because of the stupid finish. After the pair had punched each other for a long amount of time, Taker decided that he would revert to a child and was all like, I'm gonna try and rip Kane's mask off. And understandably, that wound Kane up. So when Taker did remove it, the big red machine just went, and ran to the back because he didn't want anyone to see his fake burned face. It meant the scrap just stopped, or I suppose Kane got counted out. I don't think anybody cared. And talking about nobody caring, that carried on here because SummerSlam 2000 is such a good pay-per-view, this just kind of faded into a background, but when you watch it by itself, it don't make any sense. I mean, look, it did prolong the feud and it was building elsewhere, but as a stepping stone, we could have had a better one. Number 13, Hell in a Cell 2010. A decent enough trilogy happened between the pair in 2010, but I would pick this one as the worst of the bunch. And once again, it was what was happening around it as opposed to what was happening in the ring. Because not only did you have this Hell in a Cell match to end the show, but you also had one at the start of the event between Sheamus and Randy Orton, and neither were as crazy as ones that Mankind and Mick Foley had been involved in, so they just fell a little bit flat. The end was also, once again, all over the place. Paul Bearer had returned to The Undertaker's side, and everyone was like, wahoo, wahey, the boys are back in town. But then, when we got to the finish, he used The Undertaker's urn to blind the dead man, which is ridiculous, proving that he was actually by Kane's side. Kane used the blinding to his advantage, smashed The Undertaker, and he got the 1, 2, 3, and retained his world title. And it made sense in terms of where we were going, but this was never going to be high on anyone's list, hence why it's not high on my list. Number 12, Survivor Series 98. A weird one this, because no matter what Kane and Undertaker did, they were always going to be playing second fiddle to the fact that at Survivor Series 1998, we had a one-night tournament to crown a brand new WWF champion, and so that's all everybody wanted to see. And WWE did tell a load of other stories here to make you properly invested and go, oh, I don't know what's going to happen next. And once again, Paul Bearer and The Undertaker were together, but this time they were the bad guys, so they cheated to screw over Kane. So we were just doing the reverse. However, as it was just another match on a card that was full of them, it only went around about 7 minutes. It didn't really mean that much of anything. And it's passable, and it's fun, but really, even at its height, it's just decent. It also had another dumb finish, so who the hell says they're exclusive to 2020? Because after Kane had been distracted, Undertaker hit a chokeslam, and do you know what Paul Bearer did? He held down on Kane's foot. Like, Paul Bearer has the strength to hold the big red machine's foot down. That is preposterous. Number 11, Raw from November 2000. This was just an Attitude Era style match, so there's not really much to say about it, other than to give you the rules of any type of late 90s WWE match. You get no time, you have to brawl outside the ring within 30 seconds, and there will be so much interference, it's like the floodgates have opened. But because all the fans and all the audience are going absolutely crazy and losing their mind, even when you're sat on your couch, you're like, oh my gosh, I'm losing my mind too. It's like a shot of adrenaline. And that's all this was too. It went 4 minutes, and before you could say Katie Vick, Christian Edge and Kurt Angle in there beating up the dead man for the DQ. So Kane was like, all right, well, if you're gonna beat him up, I'll join in as well. So he did. It's like when you get invited out for some ice cream, you just go with it because nobody's gonna say no for ice cream. So actually, if you do go watch this, you will have a good time, but there ain't nothing to write home about, and also your mum wouldn't care. Number 10, Raw from February '99. You can never get mad at this because WWE gave away an Inferno match on free television. Thanks WCW, like it was never gonna be as good or as important as the first one, but still, an Inferno match on free TV. Imagine they did this today, we'd all be losing our minds, especially if it came from the Performance Center. There's no way that's allowed, you'd be breaking fire rules. Even with that though, this was still about the crazy narrative that was going on in the background, because Kane had either been drugged or was just forced to stay in the corporation even though he didn't want to. And on the other side, The Undertaker had returned to WWE with his ministry and had decided, I am going to take over the WWE, even though he never told us why. He just wanted to be CEO. To try and stop all of this then, Vince McMahon set up the Inferno match and was like, Kane, go and set fire to The Undertaker, then he'll be dead and all my problems will be sorted. I mean, look, it will work, but there will also be consequences. It was a cool visual because of course it was, and we shall talk about it more later, but once again, you were meant to focus on the ending, where The Undertaker set fire to a teddy bear, leaving Vince McMahon to fall to his knees like, whoa. And originally I was like, oh wow, Vince McMahon must really like teddy bears. But then we did find out this was Stephanie McMahon's childhood toy, and I ain't gonna get into the rest of it, but no, it just gets more and more bonkers. This was so nuts, however, that it was damn good fun. Number 9, Raw from June '98. Now we are getting going, because this is a historic night, all things considered. After Kane had tombstoned his brother The Undertaker to get a win in a match after interference from Mankind, he did indeed speak for the first time, or took that ridiculous voice box, put it to his throat, and looked at Stone Cold Steve Austin, the WWF champion, and went, Stone Cold, the blood on you this Sunday will be for real. Now this sounds weird until you know what was going on, but he now was the number 1 contender, and he'd also just dumped a bunch of blood, the red stuff, over the rattlesnake's head, but he was like, haha, it was just food coloring or something. But this weekend, I'm making you cut open. The real joy is that you've got Austin and Vince McMahon on commentary, and they are just great together. And of course, this is setting up all the matches for King of the Ring 1998, and we all know what happened there. We just tried to kill Mick Foley. It's why you should watch this episode of Raw anytime you do want to watch the pay-per-view, because it ties it together so nicely. And for my money, this is the best presentation of Kane. He's so damn cool, but he's so damn terrifying at the same time, because, you know, could have done without that, but whatever. Number 8, Night of Champions 2010. We mentioned the trilogy of matches from this year, and this is entrant number 2. And yeah, it's alright. Fought under no holds barred rules, which meant both guys could go absolutely crazy. It was coming months away from Undertaker having that amazing match with Shawn Michaels, and was months before he was going to have another one at WrestleMania with Triple H. The reason I mention that is because it was during a period where you could have just pitched this as 2 big dudes want to have a fight, but of course WWE was never able to do that with Kane and The Undertaker, because we were told that the dead man had been left in a, and I'm quoting here, vegetative state months earlier, and Kane had been so annoyed about this, he had been trying to figure out who had done it. Turns out he had done it, and it was a big red herring, hence why they had to have a match. It ended when Taker went for his own tombstone, and that got reversed, so Kane hit his, and he got the 1, 2, 3, and once again held on to his championship. And I tell you this, if you just sit down and watch it casually, it ain't half bad. Number 7, Mayhem in Manchester from 1998. If this had been awful, everybody involved could have been forgiven, because the UK just decided on this day, screw you Undertaker, we gonna kick your bum. Because not only did he lose his luggage during the flight across the pond, but WWE at basically the last minute decided, well, we've got this Mayhem in Manchester thing. We were gonna pitch it as a pay-per-view, but let's not do that, and it will just be a standard house show instead. So it's just all over the place. And to WWE's credit, they did come up with this story that D-Generation X had attacked Undertaker before he was able to get to the ring, hence why he came out in strange clothes. And I think by this point, both guys were like, to hell with it, and they just engaged in a really fun 20-minute brawl. Taker also won, which sent the fans home happy, and again, because this was just a house show, it really did exceed expectations. Now, of course, given all that, it's quite hard to find online, but the internet is your friend. Number 6, Raw from '98. This is yet another brilliant and forgotten gem, because as the war between WWE and WCW continued to rage, Vince McMahon went, well, I know what we can do. We will put a casket match on Monday nights, and we'll see how that works. And they did. There's also a cool story because Kane and The Undertaker had fallen out because they both wanted to become the WWF champion, so that made that belt feel really important. And then they went out there and kicked lumps out of each other. It's proper hard hitting. The casket was also massive, which I found funny because I'm a massive idiot, but it was designed that way so the two could get in it, close the lid, and have a fight inside said casket. Now this was a little bit comical because it just kind of jolted from side to side as you were meant to imagine them like punching each other in the head. But I suppose they just got in there and jiggled. They did this with too much vigor though, because then the casket broke and they spilled out the side, and I don't think I'd ever see that before. Throw in that Undertaker did his mad dive over the ropes as he always did, and I like this. None of it made any sense, but again, it did happen in the Attitude Era, and when Kane was walking off, Undertaker just hit him with a steel chair, and I guess this was a draw, but I have absolutely no idea why. Number 5, WrestleMania 14. It may be at number 5, but in many ways you could even say this was the best. I know that's absolutely crazy, but I'm standing by it because let's not forget this was the first encounter between The Undertaker and Kane that had almost been 1 year in the making. I mean, the Big Red Machine had debuted in October 1997, but the story had started in the summer when Paul Bearer was like, he's alive, he's alive. Undertaker was like, what are you talking about? All of this meant it was just drowning in narrative, and while you can point fingers at it and go, well, the story was really stupid, because why was Paul Bearer saying there was a lost sibling? You can do that with anything. Football, break down football, or you just chuck a ball and run on some grass. Yeah, but it's great to watch and it's great to play. Kane was also pitched perfectly as The Undertaker's equal, and he'd set him on fire at the Royal Rumble, and there was just this tiny doubt in your head that the dead man was gonna come up short. Of course he didn't, and he was able to vanquish Kane, but all of this so damn good. The coolest spot is when the Phenom went for that giant dive again and Kane basically caught him and threw him through a table, and if nothing else, go and watch the entrances. It will give you goosebumps. Number 4, Bragging Rights 2010. Number 3 in that 2010 trilogy, WWE remembered a very important rule here, and that is if you are going to do dumb stuff, make sure you do dumb stuff hard. Pitting The Undertaker and Kane in a Buried Alive match, the first one we had seen in 7 years, this not only worked for the characters, but gave something new for the World Heavyweight Championship, and it worked because everybody went out there and was insistent that it did, and therefore it worked. There was more shenanigans in order to push Kane and protect The Undertaker, in the sense it was the Nexus coming out to beat up the dead man, which allowed Kane to win, and this was absolute nonsense because there was no follow-up. The Big Red Machine and Wade Barrett's group never had a conversation, and by the time The Undertaker returned to the ring, he was feuding with Triple H. Still, it did cause quite the surprise and a stir at the time. It's still fun to watch. Number 3, WrestleMania 20. Yeah, this was all sizzle and barely any steak, as JR would say, but I couldn't give 2 hoots. WrestleMania 20 was a mad event with literally everything going on, so just getting to see The Undertaker be The Undertaker and see Kane be Kane, it ticked my boxes. And let's start as ever with the story, because back at Survivor Series, Kane had buried the American Badass, which he didn't realize just meant that that character died and the original dead man was able to return. I mean, go and watch this now. The Big Red Machine's in the ring just shouting, I killed you, I buried you, but you didn't learn. Yokozuna tried this and he fell too. He was out there in his old garb and he was accompanied by Paul Bearer and the Druids, and the fact that this was going down in Madison Square Garden made this a WrestleMania moment for the ages. Kane never got over it. It barely went 8 minutes, and the most important part is that every single person sat in that arena that night got what they hoped and what they wanted, and That's what wrestling's all about. Number 2, Unforgiven 1998. If we are watching wrestling for the spectacle, it doesn't come higher than this. And I know we've already talked about one Inferno match, but this was round 1, and you can't understand the shock and awe of fans when we were told, just because Paul Bearer had some crazy dream, that we were going to surround the squared circle in flames and then just have a couple of guys wrestle. Are you kidding me? And sure, when you actually saw it, it wasn't as fiery as you were expecting, but what did you want WWE to do? Just light the whole thing on fire? Of course not. It was still absolutely crazy to witness, and it still is in 2020. Kane and Undertaker couldn't really work like they would have wanted for obvious reasons, but it didn't matter because every time one of them took a bump, these flames would just fly up in the air, and it was a little bit breathtaking. The highlight was when The Undertaker did his dive once more, this time over the damn fire, and smashed Kane, and eventually the big red machine got knocked into the flames. He was set on fire on the arm, and then of course legged it to the back to be fire extinguished, because this wasn't actually real. Even 22 years on, I still can't believe this. It's a mad concept, and it's even madder that it got greenlit. Number 1, Smackdown from April 2008. Sounds random, I know, but seriously, go and watch it. Kane and Taker decided to go out there and have an absolute barn burner, even though they've been told, you've only got 9 minutes, and it's gonna be a no contest. Because as brand new ECW and WWE champions, Kane and Undertaker just felt so refreshed here, and they were coming off serious victories from WrestleMania. Kane had beaten Chavo Guerrero in like 11 seconds, and The Undertaker had just stormed it with edge. It was clear we were going to continue on those programs too, so I assume this was done to spike a TV rating, but it did work, and again, it's just a really good fun pro wrestling match. They don't stop from bell to bell, do that double throat grab spot that always sends fans crazy. It was just one of them nights. As mentioned, it did finish when Chavo and Edge ran in there to try and get some kind of revenge, but then they got beaten up, which also meant as Kane and Undertaker left, they got to the top of the rampway, both did that arm thingy as they held their belts, and I think it's a lovely thing to witness. Brothers doing brotherly things. So given this was just another episode of WWE Secondary Show, it makes it all the more important. Feel like any of these matches need to be switched around? You can do that in the comments below, and I will be looking because I know some of you will be mad. Like the video, share the video, hit the subscribe button, then head over to whatculture.com, read yourself some articles, follow What Culture at WhatCultureWWE on Twitter, and watch more videos here on What Culture Wrestling. My name is Simon from What Culture. Thank you to Kane, thank you to The Undertaker. I think you're both flipping brilliant, and I always will. Come at me.